Go on, take a deep breath. Half of that oxygen you just breathed in didn't come from a tree. It came from the ocean. So, what happens to the other half when the ocean is gone? Let's imagine it. In the deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench, a hole opens, not a small one, a drain the size of a country, pulling water out of our world with impossible physics. What would happen first? It wouldn't be a tidal wave. It would be the opposite, a global sloshing retreat. We meet Cora, living in a city perched on the coast of what used to be Portugal. She doesn't see a giant wave of destruction. She sees the harbor simply empty. The tide goes out, and it just doesn't stop. Fishing boats drop, their hulls cracking on the suddenly exposed rock. A few hours later, the entire bay is a muddy field. Then the horizon itself starts to drop. The sound isn't a roar, it's a deep, planetary hum. A bass note you feel in your bones as a trillion gallons of water begin to move towards one point on the globe. The first victims are, of course, the ones who call the ocean home. In the first few days, a great dying occurs, the largest extinction event in the history of the planet. Whales, dolphins, sharks, every air-breathing marine mammal is beached almost simultaneously across the world's expanding coastlines. Their own weight, no longer supported by the water, crushes them. It's a symphony of crushing, groaning, and cracking on a global scale. Then comes the smell. Trillions upon trillions of fish, crustaceans, and plankton, exposed to the air and sun, begin to decay. The stench is unimaginable, a suffocating blanket of death that rides on the winds and covers entire continents for months. This isn't just an ecological disaster, it's a sensory apocalypse. After a few weeks, the water level has dropped by thousands of feet, and we begin to see it, the true face of our planet. The continents we know are revealed to be just the tips of colossal mountains. Now, they are connected by vast, newly exposed land bridges. You could, in theory, walk from New York to London. The journey would take you down into the Somme abyssal plain, a dark, muddy expanse 1,000 times larger than any desert on the old surface. Then, you'd have to climb the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. This isn't just a mountain range. It's the Earth's seam, a chain of volcanoes and jagged peaks taller than the Himalayas and 10 times as long, now towering into a thin, dry atmosphere. It would be the new undisputed king of mountains on a planet that suddenly has a lot more of them. We'd discover things that would rewrite our history books overnight. Perfectly preserved shipwrecks from every era of human history, from ancient Phoenician galleys to World War II battleships, all resting on the dark seabed like toys in a sandbox. We'd find the ruins of sunken cities, but also geological formations more alien than anything we've imagined on Mars. It's hard to wrap your head around just how much water we're talking about. The oceans hold over 320 million cubic miles of it. If you could somehow form that water into a single cube, it would stretch from Los Angeles to New York, and it would be just as tall, reaching far past the International Space Station. Losing it doesn't just give us new real estate. It fundamentally breaks our world. So, with all this new land, humanity would have more space to expand, right? Wrong. The new land is a toxic graveyard. Millennia of accumulated sediment, heavy metals, and volcanic brine have made the seabed a sterile, salty wasteland. Nothing can grow there. For Cora's community, the former coast is now a cliff edge, overlooking a dizzying drop into a world of salt-encrusted mud and choking dust. The winds, no longer softened by ocean moisture, become brutal and constant, kicking up continent-sized dust storms that blot out the sun for weeks. But the most terrifying change isn't what's happening on the ground, it's what's happening in the AIR. The oceans are the planet's heart, pumping heat around the globe through massive currents. Without them, the climate regulation system completely shuts down. The equator becomes an uninhabitable furnace, with temperatures regularly soaring above 150 degrees Fahrenheit. The poles, no longer warmed by currents like the Gulf Stream, plunge into a permanent, unsurvivable deep freeze. The habitable zones of our planet shrink to two thin, temperate bands. And then it stops raining, almost everywhere. About 90% of the world's rain comes from ocean evaporation. We didn't just drain the oceans, we turned off the sky. The Amazon rainforest dries up and burns in a fire so vast it creates its own weather system of smoke and ash. The world's great rivers, the Nile, the Mississippi, the Yangtze, slow to a trickle and then vanish, their sources in the mountains no longer replenished. The planet would become a world of dust, salt, and sun. But the biggest danger isn't the heat or even the lack of water. It's the AIR we breathe. Over half of the oxygen on Earth is produced by one thing: phytoplankton, tiny microscopic organisms drifting in the sunlit zones of the ocean. In our scenario, they were the first to go, dying in the first few hours. So the planet's primary oxygen factory has been decommissioned. At the same time, the oceans act as the world's largest carbon sink, absorbing immense amounts of CO2. Without them, all that carbon has nowhere to go. The concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere skyrockets. This triggers a runaway greenhouse effect that makes the previous heating look mild. The air itself begins to change. The oxygen level slowly drops. Breathing at sea level would eventually feel like breathing on a high mountain peak. For Cora, every breath is a little more labored. Her community has to move, not just away from the coast, but higher into the old mountains, chasing the thinner, cooler air. And yet, life is resilient. Down in the deepest, darkest parts of the New World, something is still alive. The hydrothermal vents, those volcanic chimneys on the ocean floor, never needed sunlight to begin with. Here, in the crushing dark, entire ecosystems have always thrived on chemical energy seeping from the Earth's core. Chemosynthetic bacteria, giant tube worms, blind crabs. For them, the apocalypse that scoured the surface clean barely registered. In fact, with the immense pressure of the water gone, they might even begin to expand, adapting to the new low-pressure environment. Strange, bioluminescent fungi could begin to spread across the abyssal plains, feeding on the chemical-rich sediment and the detritus of the dead world above. The dark, empty ocean floor would begin to glitter with new, alien life. Humanity's last stand would be a strange one. We'd become a species of scavengers, exploring the deep. Teams in advanced pressure suits would descend into the abyss, not for treasure, but for resources. They would mine the frozen methane hydrates on the continental shelves for energy. They'd explore the shipwrecks for preserved materials. They'd navigate the canyons of the mid-Atlantic ridge, a new frontier more hostile and alien than the moon. Cora becomes one of these explorers. Her generation knows the stories of the blue planet as myths. She walks on the floor of the North Atlantic, the lights of her suit cutting through the eternal dust-filled twilight. She sees the Titanic, not as a sunken relic, but as a monument on a vast, dark plain. She sees the skeletons of blue whales, larger than any building she knows, half buried in the silt. Their bones now home to glowing ecosystems of fungi. The greatest secret the drained oceans revealed wasn't some lost city of Atlantis or a kraken's lair. The secret was the ocean itself. We always saw it as a feature on our planet, a big body of water filling in the low spots. But we were wrong. It wasn't on the Earth. It was part of it. It was the planet's circulatory system, its lungs and its heart. Draining the oceans wasn't like draining a pool. It was like draining the blood from a living being. And as Cora stands on the dead heart of her world, looking up at the faint orange sun through a sky that will never be blue again, she understands the real lesson. We were never living on a planet. We were living inside a giant, impossibly complex and fragile living machine. And we just found out what happens when you remove the most important part.